Most importantly, to debunk what appears to be widespread misconceptions as well as myths regarding vaccines. This special broadcast is, of course, brought to you by the Ministry of Health in part of ongoing interventions across the country to draw back the spectre of malaria in the country. I'm Chris Higenyi. You're very most welcome. I have with me guests who are going to help us understand, but most importantly, learn what ought to be done, especially for parents as well as caretakers of children across the country. With me in the studio is Dr. Gavin David Nsubuga. He's a medical director at Gavin Healthcare, a health and wellness clinic in Chireka specializing in weight management, chronic diseases, wellness and general medicine. He's also a health educator, notably for social media interventions where the TikTok channel at Consult the Doctor shares daily health tips and answers questions from the general public regarding healthcare and especially health myths. Dr. Nsubuga, you're most welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
I also have with me Dr. Ombeva Malande, who is a Stanford Global Health Scholar, a vaccinologist and a pediatric infectious disease specialist. He's a certified fellow of the College of Pediatrics of South Africa and is here to talk to us about vaccines, immunization, and most importantly, help us understand why you must not at any one point in time question the vaccines that come your way, especially as rolled out by the government and the Ministry of Health. Dr. Ombeva, please welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Great having you on board. Now, routine immunization with focus on zero-dose children and introduction of new vaccines into the routine immunization structure is something that may be not well understood out there. But let me first begin with asking what is no doubt a basic question. What is immunization? I think let's begin with Dr. Ombeva.
Yeah, so immunization is, in simple terms, being able to introduce an agent, which in this case is a vaccine, to produce a response within the body that would be exactly as the body would have responded to a disease caused by that particular agent or a similar one like that. So you just want to induce the response that the body would produce if the disease occurred in defense of itself. That's what immunization is. Right. So, for example, if a malaria parasite entered the human body through mosquito bite, the body tries to defend itself by producing its own mechanisms of defense, its police and its army. So when we introduce a vaccine, we are making the body produce that without the disease process. And then the body will remember and keep that memory. The next time the malaria comes, it will find the body already armed and protected. Okay.
And this works across all diseases?
That's across all diseases that are vaccine preventable.
That are vaccine preventable.
Yeah, because there are some which may not be prevented by the vaccines, but the ones that vaccines can prevent, that's the general mechanism.
Okay.
Build immunity, arm the body ahead of time, so that the body is
able to deal,
it's protected.
With whatever comes its way. Okay, that's a very good overview on the immunization and exactly what it is. The reason I ask that question first is for us to understand where we're coming from when people and health experts in particular come up and make it very clear that we need to immunize against malaria. Malaria itself being a specter that we have grappled with as a country for many, many years. And when it comes to the routine immunization, there is a lot that is still lacking. So, Dr. Nsubuga, malaria on its own, we may know it, we may understand how it presents, but what is it?
So, malaria is this major problem in Uganda that we've been grappling with for many, many years. So you're having this disease that is spread by the mosquitoes, specifically the female anopheles mosquito, moving around with this parasite we call the Plasmodium parasite. So when it gets this parasite from someone who is already infected with it and comes and passes it over to you by biting you, you can get this infection as well. Now, malaria is a major issue in Uganda, like I've said. In Uganda, you'll have something like 5% of all children below rather you have something like 14% of children who are dying below 5 dying from malaria. So it is a major public health issue. So there are these specific populations like the children below 5, the pregnant mothers, the people who are just coming, migrants who are just coming into Uganda who haven't lived in this area. They will be particularly susceptible to this issue, and it can either cause death or major complications. Things like anemia, things like miscarriages in pregnant ladies, etc.
Okay, so that is understandable when that particular spectre has to be dealt with. But the population might not really understand why the immunization should come through and at what specific interventions. So why should the immunization be done the way it is done?
So basically, your body's immune system has ways of defending itself against many of these illnesses, the illnesses brought by germs. However, your body's immune system needs some time to learn. It's some kind of lag of like 2 to 3 weeks where it is learning this new germ that it has been infected with, so that it can make these appropriate things we call antibodies. They're like bombs that are targeted on that particular germ itself. Now, what we do, we shall give you this vaccine. Sometimes it will be this exact germ, but when it has been inactivated or it's not dangerous anymore. So we give it to you, and we teach your body's immune system this germ. So in case when you get infected with this germ, on a later date, your body already knows this germ, and it will be able to fight it promptly, prevent these major complications. So mostly in malaria, it will not prevent you getting the illness, but it will prevent you getting the severe form of the malaria. You might get that simple one where you get some simple fever, something like that. But you will not reach the other levels of having to go to hospital, dying, getting miscarriages, etc. So that is where the vaccine will come in. Okay. Yes.
So that is mainly the transmission aspects that might determine what levels or how much of the disease you suffer.
Yes, please. Because when the disease first gets you, when you contract the disease and you get the infection, it has to first go to your liver. And in the liver, it kind of grows and gains strength to be able to cause this full-blown infection. But our vaccine will catch it at that stage before it infects your liver. So you might get the simple one, but the other serious one, you will not get.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So, Dr. Mbeva, the ministry updated the routine immunization schedule a while ago, introduced some new vaccines into the routine schedule. What are these new vaccines, and are they mainly anchored on malaria alone, or there are some other preventable diseases that are can be vaccinated?
Yeah, so this year we celebrated, it's actually last year, we celebrated 50 years of the expanded program on immunization in the world, since when the EPI program was launched by the World Health Organization, initially beginning with 6 vaccines in the 70s. And then countries were encouraged to continue to add on as scientific knowledge has advanced. Remember, the WHO estimates that immunization is the second most important public health intervention for preventing infectious diseases, only second to clean water.
Wow.
In fact, if you have clean and safe water, it's number 1. Number 2, it's immunization in terms of preventing diseases. There are very many children who used to die because of measles, who no longer die because of measles because of the vaccination. In fact, in some communities, children who survived measles were called born again. Because you could never count your kids until when they've suffered measles. First, ask you how many kids you have, you say, wait first, mine haven't suffered measles. Because very many of them would suffer measles. So it's only when your kids have suffered measles and survived, then you can say, I have 3, I have 4.
Wow.
That's how bad measles was. And even diseases like influenza, diseases like pneumonia, for example. Pneumonia kills more children than HIV, TB, and malaria combined. In Uganda here, malaria bites. If you go to the Choga area, the areas where we have the highest density of malaria, one child receives 1,567 mosquito bites per year.
Give us that statistic again.
So if you divide, so let me simplify it. If you divide that by a year, which is around 365 days, that means one child can receive up to 5 or 6 infective mosquito bites per night. Every night.
Wow.
That is just how many mosquito bites are there, potentially infective. So now, when you look at malaria, malaria has been such a big disease for us, especially in children under 5 years of age and in pregnant mothers. Majority of these mothers who you hear who die who are pregnant or who are dying in childbirth, a significant number of them die because of low blood. And low blood is what you call anemia. And anemia is the biggest killer in malaria. In fact, majority of those who die because of malaria die because of anemia. So that if we have interventions that are targeting reducing malaria, because there are people who said, we've always had malaria, it's always been here, why should we now begin vaccinating it? The malaria we have always known. You have always known the malaria, but it's because you have not had a relative who has died of malaria because they're pregnant. Or your child who is under 5 years of age. But if you go to most of our facilities, if you look at the density of the number of bites that I've just told you, these children die because of this malaria when they get anemia. If they get pneumonia, they even die more. In the studies that were done in Kenya, Ghana, and Malawi, that looked at the testing of the malaria vaccine, they showed that not only did even the vaccine prevent malaria itself, but it even prevented all-cause mortality. What we mean by all-cause mortality is that children who come to hospital and die for whatever reason, you're just looking at children who entered facility and who died. The total number of dying children reduced by 13%, meaning that if 100 would have died, 87 ended up dying, meaning that you saved the 13%. This means the malaria goes beyond the malaria disease itself. If you have malaria and have pneumonia, you are likely to die. If you have malaria and have malnutrition, you are likely to die. If you protect them against the malaria, you give them a higher chance of surviving the malnutrition. So the point is that as countries were encouraged to increase and add vaccines onto their profile, Uganda actually has done better than all countries in Africa. It has the highest number of vaccine preventable diseases provided by the government on their schedule, coming to 14 now. In East Africa, it's way ahead of Kenya, way ahead of Rwanda, way ahead of what? It's the best performing in terms of number of vaccines added. Recently, we have added injectable polio, we have added yellow fever, we have added malaria. And these are you talk to so many people who want to leave the country. You would never go out of the country. Of course, you can't go out of the country without a yellow fever vaccine injection. But getting the book had become a problem. But now the vaccine is available. Sorry, the vaccine is available everywhere in the country. You can get the vaccine for free. And that then means that we're able to protect our population adequately. So we've added more antigens. It's not just malaria alone. We've added more recently, vaccine for pneumonia, vaccine for diarrhea, vaccine for yellow fever, vaccine for injectable polio, just to make sure that the children are more adequately protected.
Okay. Dr. Nsubuga, the prevalence of malaria across the country is something that we cannot overstate. We all know the burden that the average Ugandan faces. But when you see the interventions that are focused on zero-dose children, you're talking about a multiplicity of vaccines being introduced, but you also have the vaccine that you ought to do a lot of education about in order to debunk the insensitivities around it and other vaccines. How is this being managed? Because I have with me what appears to be a whole plethora of vaccines: tuberculosis, BCG, poliomyelitis, I hope I got that right, polio vaccine, whooping cough, DPT, HB, Hib vaccine, diphtheria, measles, maternal neonatal tetanus. Tell me how all this is being done in order for us to be able to register success on each front.
So first of all, it always starts in antenatal. When our mothers go for antenatal, one of the things, it's not about getting medicine and getting tests, but it's about getting the information.
That is right.
So the midwives, the doctors, they will take you through all this information. That you are at birth, we shall be giving you these ones, at 6 weeks we shall be giving these ones, 12 weeks these ones. And then also immediately after birth, there's that book that we call it the child health card. Sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's a card. It will come very well printed with the UNEP program. So anyone who is literate, I should say, should be able to read and just know that this is the time, this is the time. Also the midwives should remember to remind our mothers that next time you should come for this one, that next week you're coming for this one. At our facility, we've started this thing of having the phone numbers. We're now in a digital age where we can talk to mothers and remind them and things like that. So something along those lines, the digital age and giving the information more in the hospitals from our midwife, from our doctors.
Okay. You talk about at our facility. I must apologize. I should have given you an opportunity to talk to us about the center where you are basically focusing on a range of interventions.
Yes, sir.
Just throw some light on that before we can get the whole picture.
So our facility called Gavin Healthcare in Chireka, it's a health and wellness clinic. We see normal patients, general medicine, though we mostly specialize in weight management, things like weight loss, chronic illnesses, most of that come from metabolic things, diet, nutrition, things like back pain, you know, those things we call the chronic illnesses. There is this new medication we call the GLP-1s, or Ozempic, Mounjaro, so our clinic have pioneered those programs in this country, and they're helping a lot of people in the weight management and more in that chronic illness thingy.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Yes, Dr. Mbeva, effectiveness and safety, those are concerns within the population. Many people have their sentiments regarding vaccines. Before they agree to one vaccine, another is being rolled out. How do you deal with that? How effective are these vaccines and how safe are they?
So thank you so much. And you've raised a question that is very close to my heart, particularly as a member of the Adverse Events Causality Assessment Committee for Vaccines in Uganda. One of the things that we must know, there is no vaccine that is licensed and allowed into the country before it goes through rigorous research. And this research is done at different levels. And the overriding goal is safety. Safety is the most important goal, more than effectiveness, more than efficacy. And I will define those three different terms.
Okay.
Safety is so important to make sure that you need to remember that vaccines, unlike drugs, medicines and drugs, we give them to sick patients. So, you know, when you go to the hospital and you are sick and the doctor gives you this, you are trying to get well. So, the threshold for a drug may not be so high. The ceiling is not so high. But for vaccines, you are giving it to a healthy person. You are not giving it to a sick person. You found a child who is healthy, a person who is healthy. Yeah. So the ceiling of safety for drugs is very high. For vaccines, rather. It's very high compared for the drugs. If the ceiling is for vaccines is this high, the ceiling for the drugs may be. So meaning that the margin of error for vaccines, you are not supposed to make mistakes in terms of how safe is this product. And the vaccines have to go through proven and internationally tested research. So not only do the manufacturers go through those strict processes of checking sure that they have done this vaccine according to internationally accepted standards and according to the Declaration of Helsinki about treating human subjects in research. Not only do they adhere to that, even after doing that worldwide for every vaccine, these vaccines that they go through, they collect all that data. Once they are completed, approved by approved ethical bodies, once that is done, those vaccines are taken to a second body, which is called the FDA in the US, which again goes through examining all the stages that they've gone through, what we call the phases, phase 1 to phase 3 of research. Once they've done that and they've completed, the FDA sends it to a third committee called the ACIP. The ACIP committee is the committee that looks at immunization that licenses all vaccines. And again goes through the researchers, audits every stage. If they are happy with what they have found, then ACIP sends it to CDC and WHO. So CDC will look at them for the American populations, and WHO looks at them for the rest of the world. And again, audits all that research that has gone into manufacturing that vaccine. How many people suffered? How many people died? How many people got improvement? How many? When that is completed, then the WHO recommends it to the countries. Then it comes to Uganda. The NDA again sits down and goes through all those stages. Did it go through this? Did it go to research? Did it go to ACIP? Did it go to WHO? And looks through all the data and assesses it for safety. Even our committee that looks at safety and causality assessment again goes through all that before that vaccine is released to go into the body of a child.
Wow.
Alongside that,
Very
even if NDA is happy, there's a committee called the Technical Immunization Advisory Group,
That
a
one
group
is
of
also-
experts
Yeah.
in Uganda. The ministry can never roll out a vaccine without the National Immunization Technical Advisory Group approving it. It is here in Uganda, NITAG. I sit on one for the WHO, it's called the RITAG. We sit in Brazzaville, Congo Brazzaville. We receive the information from the from WHO in Geneva. We look at it and ask ourselves, is this safe for Africa? We again assess all that. When we finish, we send it to individual countries, which have individual NITAG groups, and they go through again all the data. If they are not satisfied, they say, let us do our own study here to confirm this data.
Okay.
Only then will the Ministry of Health say we now have a vaccine to roll out. There are like 8 to 10 checks.
And in between the various checks mechanisms that are available, do we have the sufficient tools required? Because the manpower could be there, the expertise could be there, but the tools required to certify. We always fall into troubles of, say, for example, resource allocation has been low, and then a certain particular department is asking for more money to be able to do that. Don't you ever fall into such pitfalls?
So the tools, the only challenge where we've had a challenge with the tools is after rollout. Now, but before, in terms of the rigor of our assessment before we take these vaccines out, it's excellent. We are very well capacitated at the level of the WHO and the national committees.
Okay.
And the NDA is very well capacitated, by the way, to go through all that. The only challenge that comes in sometimes, our committee only does not stop at introducing it. We now look at side effects that emerge in the field when the vaccine now has been launched and people are receiving. Any single report that comes out is relayed to our committee, and we go through that again. The challenges can come in at that point where maybe someone was in Nakapiripiriti or somewhere and suffered an adverse event, and there were delays in investigation. And most of the time, they are more of system as opposed to capacitation to investigate.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we get the person? Did the person die? So that is the challenge. If someone has died now, we are only left with the post-mortem. But in terms of investigating, we are able to do that, yeah.
Wow, I can see the challenges that you go through, but also the test to the conscience that you have to endure. But as medical doctors, the training is sufficient to allow you to deal with that. Now, he talks about something that could happen within the execution after the vaccines have been taken or administered, is the right word to use. There is a whole lot of vaccines, that one I must say. At what point should a child take the malaria vaccine, take the polio vaccine, take the diphtheria vaccine, and who is there to actually help in the monitoring to ensure parents and caregivers are on spot when it comes to allowing these kids to get these vaccines?
Okay. So, per the UNEP schedule, the vaccination usually starts at birth. There are things like the oral polio vaccine, and now there's the new hepatitis B vaccine. Those ones will be administered even before the baby leaves. Before the baby leaves the hospital at birth. Okay. Then at around six weeks, we shall also have others. Now, like I've said, the mother will have the health card and they will know the dates. In fact, after giving each vaccination, the midwives will write the date for the next vaccine.
For the next vaccine.
Yeah, in the vaccination card. Let me go to the malaria ones because they're the new ones. So they will be for children who are 1 year and below 1 year. At the moment, we're only giving them for 1 year, but I think we're going to roll out for other populations in the due course. So the first dose will be gotten at 6 weeks, rather 6 months of age. Then the next dose will be gotten at 7 months of age. The next dose will be gotten at 8 months. Then we shall skip around 10 months, and the fourth dose will be gotten at 18 months. It's really important that a child finishes, or rather completes this regimen the way it has been recommended. Evidence has showed that a child who finishes it will get the best results. Missing even one dose might reduce on the effectiveness a little bit, so I really recommend that someone does all fully.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I come across a word that is both disturbing and interesting. Zero dose children.
Zero dose children.
I mean, those who have never received any vaccine in the routine immunization schedule, and they have lived. But all of a sudden, either at ages above 1, the need for the vaccine is made very clear to the parent or the caregiver. How does this roll out? Because I believe you're dealing with so many challenges at that point in time, including the traditional beliefs around vaccination itself. Is that a question for you? You can answer best.
So, before COVID, worldwide, we had about 19.2 million children who were not completing the immunization schedule as recommended.
Any immunization?
Or some.
Okay.
They would receive some and miss out on others. So it's about 19.2 million. Because of the challenges that we suffered because of COVID problems, we ended up with that number worldwide rising to around 25.2 million. Of those 25 million, 18 million are the zero-dose children. And what we mean by zero dose, in practical terms, are children who have not received any vaccine. In statistical terms, where we used to count the numbers, so we count the children who have not received the 6 weeks vaccine dose, not the birth one. And for good reason, because remember in Africa, many mothers deliver from their homes. So it may not be practically possible for them to receive the one that we give the BCG and the polio drops at birth. If you are having 4 or 5 out of 10 of your mothers delivering at home by traditional birth attendants, or in facilities that do not routinely immunize. You know, you may be delivered in our facility, but that facility does not immunize. So those ones may be missed out. So for the purposes of counting the numbers, we count the ones who missed the 6 weeks, because we now hope that whether you delivered at home or you delivered on the road or delivered where, at least the mother should make it to the 6 weeks vaccination.
That's right.
18 million of children in the world are not getting that, are not starting that journey. And a significant number of children in Uganda are also not starting that journey, who we call the zero dosers. And that is why every time you see the government of Uganda has what we call integrated child health days, which are usually in April and in October, where they come around the communities, they go to the schools giving vaccines. The goal usually is to mop up these zero dosers and the other under-immunized who may have started the journey, and for one reason or another, they've not completed the immunization journey. Sometimes you have a young lady who has given birth to a child, gets the 6 weeks and 10 weeks vaccines, then goes to the city to look for a job, leaves the child with the grandmother, and the grandmother fails to take the child for vaccination.
Might not even know that there was a schedule that was ongoing.
So they started the journey, but then they've not completed. Other things, you go to a hospital, the vaccine is not there. Then your child ends up missing. Another time, the mother would have taken, but it is a planting season, she's going to the farm to plant. So it doesn't bring the child for the vaccination. Other times, terrain, rain is a problem to access the facility. It's a problem. So we have a lot of zero dosers and under-immunized who started the journey but didn't complete. All these are a significant number of children in our country.
Dr. Nsubuga, how do we deal with that particular challenge? A lot of zero dosers, but they also do present with other conditions as they grow, which you have to attend to. For particularly health centers or medics who might not be able to investigate fully whether these children completed the immunization schedule or not, they begin to deal with conditions that are specific to how a child is presenting at the time, when actually it could be a result of
no immunization,
no immunization, or even disturbances in the schedule.
I get. So it's standard procedure for us doctors when we are seeing patients, specifically the children, to ask about that immunization schedule. In fact, at my facility, I usually quarrel with mothers who do not move with that card. A child who has not yet made 2 years, you have to always move with that card because it's very, very important. It gives us a lot of information.
That's right.
So mothers usually should have to, So I usually recommend that mothers move with that card every time they come to our to our facilities. But then also doctors and other health workers, clinicians, we always have to ask about that immunization schedule. We've also tried to sensitize our mothers on social media these days. Social media is the new craze. So we'll talk about the immunization, whatever, we advise them, we'll try to debunk the myths. The myths are really they are really too much. But also we'll try to talk about these diseases and tell them the signs that they should see, because things like measles, there are some particular ways it presents that a mother should know, or a grandmother should know, and you should actually suspect if you're seeing them that this child might not have been immunized. So it's mostly about giving out information to the parents, to the mothers, and also the health workers should remember that when we are seeing children, that immunization schedule is a very, very important thing to talk about.
Okay.
Yes,
well, now that means the rollout of new vaccines comes on the backdrop of already existing frameworks.
Yes.
I want us to break down very quickly the various other vaccines that are in the market. Or am I being too private sector when I say in the market?
No.
Well, the Ministry of Health. This is
no. On the market, we actually even have some which are not yet in our immunization program, but they are
But they're already on the market. Yeah, that is the problem, because you go to a private facility and it's already rolling out certain vaccines that have not been either officially rolled out by the government or the Ministry of Health. How do we deal with that? But as you answer that, also take us through what those are. Hepatitis B is a disease that many would associate not with children, but to be one that presents mostly with the older persons. I might be misinformed completely about it, but it is a vaccine that is also out to tackle that particular disease. We have the yellow fever, that one you talked about a little bit earlier, the injectable polio vaccine, and then there is measles rubella vaccine. All these are being rolled out, concurrently. Please take it on.
Yeah, so hepatitis B. Hepatitis is a very big problem in Uganda, especially in the northern districts, close to the Sudan border. The population that has the hepatitis antigen in their blood is high. Actually, hepatitis is way more prevalent than HIV. There are areas where you'll find 25% to 30% have positive, seropositive for hepatitis. HIV is just around 5-6%. So hepatitis is a big problem. Now remember, you've raised a good point. You've asked, is it a bigger problem in adults than in children? Now, if a child gets hepatitis, the chances of them progressing to what we call chronic disease that damages the liver are about 90 to 95%. If an adult gets hepatitis, the chances of progressing to the form that will damage the liver and cause liver cancer is 5 to 10%. So it's actually a bigger problem in children when they contract it than in adults. Because you are sure that 9 out of 10 of children will progress to the chronic phase and into liver cancer if they get the disease. But only 5 to 10 out of 100 in adults will progress. So that is why then, if one were to target interventions for protecting children, should make sure that this vaccine is introduced at birth. In a country where you have 3 out of every 10 adults having being seropositive for hepatitis, you are better targeting the children as soon as they start their life. Because you know that the ones that do get the disease, 9 out of 10 of them will progress to severe disease. And this is the thinking behind the WHO recommending countries to adopt birth doses for hepatitis B. We indeed have some level of hepatitis protection in the vaccine that we give at 6, 10, and 14 weeks. But it is not adequate protection for countries with very high density of disease like ours. So that's why we now have a birth dose. And many countries in Africa now are introducing birth dose of hepatitis B to be able to make sure that we have maximum protection in the communities for the children.
Okay.
And now measles rubella is another one. We used to give only measles vaccine at 9 months. But the problem we faced was that there is another virus that travels very closely with the measles virus. It's called the rubella virus. This one usually affects pregnant mothers. And when the children are born, most of them are born with mental retardation, with the defects in the heart, defects in the body, in the head and the rest, eyes and cataracts and the rest, what you call the congenital rubella syndrome. To be able to protect our children from getting those effects of rubella, it is therefore important to give the children the rubella vaccine. And now the rubella vaccine was put together the measles vaccine, and it's given at 9 months and at 18 months. So that then we are protecting our children against measles, but also protecting them against rubella. The rubella one is very notorious. A child can contract it, a young girl who is 5 months, 6 months, contracts rubella, then the virus sits quietly in the body and stays there from the age of 5 months until when this young girl is 20 years and gets pregnant. Then it affects the pregnancy and causes abortions, miscarriages, or if the child comes out with congenital rubella syndrome. A virus that has been sitting quietly in the body for 20, 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Nsubuga, the side effects or vaccines is also an issue. There are some people who respond positively, overwhelmingly positively. There are those who also respond not positively. I hate to use the word negative. But you are a practitioner and you do deal with patients and clients, forgive my private sector language, who come in. When they present with effects of a vaccine, somebody gets concerned that it reinforces myths and misconceptions. Me, when my child did this, when we administered this particular vaccine, this is what happened. A peer is likely to take on that information as credible and condition their slow stance or rather ability to go and administer that particular vaccine. You also talked to us about the money. There are people who are now afraid that since the vaccines are out, the people will be asked for money. We don't have a lot of money. Some of us, when disease comes through and you go to hospital, the bills alone shock you into rethinking your direction in life. But if somebody, the other question, I'm sorry, I don't want to bombard you by the other three aspects. When one is, or rather receives the vaccine, does that replace other interventions against malaria? Simple, because somebody has gotten the vaccine after all.
Okay, so maybe let me first say this. When it to the general public, health information, you should always get health information from health professionals. Because these are kind of technical topics, and listening to your salon lady or listening to your auntie usually will not cut it.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to side effects, honestly, vaccines have very few side effects, and they are almost innocuous. There are only two common side effects that we can talk about. There's the local reaction that you can get at the place of injection where they've injected. So after around a few hours, you might find some swelling, some reddening. Usually we just put some ice and it has gone. But the next day the child is very okay. Yeah. Then there's also maybe that transient febrile where someone has some simple fever for a few hours. Also that one, just talk to us. That is nothing to worry about. Rarely will you see allergic reactions or hypersensitivity, though they are also possible. But in case your child ever gets any reaction after an injection or after a vaccination, talk to the doctor who has applied it immediately. Majority of the time there's nothing to worry about, but please just inform us. Okay. Then when you come to the point of fee or cost, it's free, totally free of charge. So we have most public hospitals, and then we have these accredited private facilities like ours. We offer these services free of charge. Because the vaccines, we get them from the Ministry of Health free of charge. So if you go to an accredited facility and they are charging you, you can report those people. The last question you had talked about was
about can somebody, can a vaccine totally replace other interventions? Majority of these
vaccines will not prevent you getting the illness itself. However, they will prevent you getting the serious effects. We have what we call the simple malaria, the one I've talked about, where you have some fever and you're like, say with a bulungi. Then you have that serious one where you have to go to hospital and the child is having anemia, low blood levels and all those things. Now, the vaccine will prevent you from reaching those levels. However, it might not prevent you from getting this simple malaria, simple illness. That's why we still recommend that you continue with the things like the sleeping in insecticide-treated mosquito nets. Things like pregnant ladies should always continue with the intermittent preventing therapy, the fancy that they take. You should always remove the bushes, there's this water, the stagnant water. You should always drain that stagnant water and continue all those other things that we used to talk about previously about preventing malaria. This is a new tool that is going to help us a lot, but it doesn't mean we should throw out the baby with the bathwater. So, yes.
present, especially you talked about, for example, rising body temperature, that is something
the fever.
The fever, that is something that can be dealt with. Somebody shouldn't be able.
Somebody
shouldn't worry.
shouldn't. What they should know is that these vaccines, by their nature, it is the exact germ that is going to cause this disease, but it has been inactivated or killed. We call it attenuated. So if your body might recognize it a little bit as a germ, a foreign invader, and inflammation, there's that one reaction we call inflammation that brings fever, that brings all those things of simple pain, but it will not go on to cause you the disease. So this is just your body noticing that, oh, I have received the vaccine you've sent. It's not saying that it's going to cause me an infection or it's going to cause me a problem, because it has been killed. It's now not toxic. Okay. So there's nothing to really worry about. These simple side effects, we can work on them easily.
Okay. As a parent, let me also ask a very layman's question. If my child has gotten multiple vaccines in a very short space of time, and they have either too many pricks on their bodies, should I be afraid, or that is quite routine?
No, so that's a good question. What you need to know is that there's a lot of research that goes into designing a vaccination schedule. Scheduling is a whole process. Once we are sure that the vaccines are safe, we now begin to do research that looks at how do they affect each other when given together. So that's why some vaccines will be given together, others cannot be given together, because did they interact with each other adversely to the harm of the person who received it? So in our scheduling process, when we have scheduled those vaccines that you're supposed to receive, they clearly indicate left thigh, right thigh, left, they indicate exactly the places where the vaccine should be given. The reason is because the studies, the researches that have been conducted have shown that this particular batch can be given together and that there will be no harm that is deleterious to the person who you are giving.
All right, let's stay on that, but just up it a little bit to a technical issue, the administration of the oral and injectable vaccines for polio.
Good.
Yeah.
So now, and this is a question many parents ask me even when they come to our immunization center, that my child got already polio drops, why are you giving polio injection? And polio, traditionally, many of us, when we were young, we received only the drops. We never received the injection. Very nice vaccine. The virus has 3 types, Vika, Visatu.
Okay.
And those 3 Vikas were in the original vaccine that we used to give by mouth, and the children would get it and it would protect them. The problem came in, why? Because this vaccine is a weakened form of polio virus. Totally weakened. It would go into the stomachs of the children, multiply there in the process of causing immunity, and some of it would come out in stool. In the process, once it gets out in stool, it reaches soil, rivers, water sources, and contaminates them. It would really never have been a problem if the children were all vaccinated. Because even if they go to swim in that river or they drink that water that is contaminated with the polio that has come from the vaccine, what we call the vaccine-derived virus, it would not harm them. Our problem is, like you stated it earlier, we have huge numbers of zero-dose children. We have very many numbers who are not immunized. When these children would get in touch with this contaminated water, this vaccine virus would go into their body and cause a form of polio that is from the vaccine, what we call vaccine-derived polio. A type 2 of that would even cause paralysis. And so it became a problem. So the scientists decided, no, instead of giving a very nice vaccine that would cause problem because of our own systems of not vaccinating all our children, let's remove the offending type, which was type 2. So they removed the type 2 from the vaccine, and the vaccine that we give now in our program is only type 1 and type 3. But then what do you do with the type 2? Because you still have to protect our children against it. The type 2 is given in the injectable vaccine. Because the injectable vaccine is completely killed. So that is how we then give type 2 in the injectable, and then we're able to give type 1 and 3 in the oral one.
All right, gentlemen, we are entering the final bend of this discussion, and I would be remiss if I do not tackle the African sentiments around vaccination. Of course, you debunked and disabused some of the myths around it, but some people are concerned and they need to hear it from the experts. Infertility. do vaccines cause that among women?
Let me talk about that, and also talk about the other one of autism.
Autism.
Because they have overblown autism out of the water. Now, infertility, what should I even say? There's zero bearing on fertility. In fact, it should actually help you, especially when you talk about the tetanus and the HPV ones. Those ones have a bearing on the female reproductive system. Okay. So when a lady is pregnant and she gets tetanus, it can easily go to the baby. The baby can easily contract it and usually causes a lot of complications. Then also that HPV1 can cause the cervical cancers and all that, disturb all that entire system. So in fact, the vaccine should help you with your fertility. There is no fear at all about infertility from the vaccinations. Then the issue of autism. There's this gentleman we call Dr. Andrew Wakefield. The scientific community will never forgive him. In 1998,
wow.
That gentleman came up with the most unscrupulous of clinical trials, and because he followed 12 children who got this measles, rubella, and I think it's MMR, that MMR.
And mumps.
Yes, and mumps, yes. So he followed only 12 children. 4 of them got autism after that, and his conclusion was that this MMR thing causes autism. Yes, it was the most outrageous of conclusions that the scientific community had ever heard of. In fact, we've had 16 follow-up studies that have all debunked that myth. However, at that time, I think the press and the general public, they were ripe to hear a scandal regarding these vaccinations. So the thing really took. Now, there are people who really are convinced that vaccinations will cause autism, but I can assure you that there's zero connection between autism and vaccinations. Zero. We've had a good number of comprehensive studies that have already debunked that myth.
Okay.
Yes,
gentlemen, many thanks. Maybe a very last one, the aspect of traditional alternatives to vaccination that are widely practiced in certain communities. Just give us an overview on that, because many people tend to think alternatives are there. If measles is rampant, that we have a way we can do it locally. If malaria is rampant, if something else is also rampant, how do you deal with this particular problem?
What the traditional teams and healers have tried to do is to attempt to provide treatment, but not vaccines. We do not have any traditional attempts that have been successful in vaccination. No. Treatment they try, and they have various medicinal components that have varying level of efficacy. Remember, even these drugs that we use come from herbs and trees and medicines and the rest. Yeah. So they've tried that because chincona alkaloids, those kind of things, artemisinin drugs.
What is that?
Even this coartem that we use for malaria treating was initially it's grown from a Chinese
tree, the bark of some Chinese tree.
Okay.
They are artemisinin. So those derivatives, they can manufacture components from them that can be of benefit in terms of treating, but not of preventing and protecting. In fact, now we are looking at how can we incorporate these traditional healers to be able to help us to take out the message about vaccines.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my master's students actually did a study in that. How can we incorporate these traditional healers to be able to support us take the message out about vaccines? And most of them are supportive. They actually do send mothers to vaccinate kids if they realize those are not vaccinated. Okay. The challenge has been religious beliefs that are inhibitory, but which we are now working to encourage them, to educate them, to help them understand that these vaccines are helpful. And many of us could have died of measles or polio if we were not vaccinated.
Oh, thank God we are alive. Your last word.
So,
especially for the public, as the ministry rolls out new vaccines into the immunization routine. So
my last word would be that the general public should know that vaccines in general are very effective and they are very safe, and currently they are free of charge. So you really have no reason why you're not taking a child for vaccination. Then I remember in 2021 I worked in Lacho Hospital in Gulu. I want to send a targeted message to the people in that area. Malaria was endemic and we're losing out of babies. My mental health was really in the pits because of that area. Please take your children for vaccination. People in that area, take your children for malaria vaccination, which it will really be very good for you.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor. Please.
Yeah, just one last word I need to say, which is important. Malaria vaccine alone won't be enough. You must make sure your child sleeps in a net, and make sure that if you see signs of illness, take the child to the hospital as fast as possible. So if we can use the vaccine, we use the treated mosquito nets, and we use early detection of cases of malaria and treatment, we'll be able to win the war against malaria.
All right. Dr. Ombeva Malande, many thanks for the information that you have shared. And I must be very candid. Ombeva Malande spoke some very good Luganda here. Oh, pretty good. And many thanks to you too, Dr. Gavin Subuga, for the works that you are rolling out in helping augment and make the work of the Ministry of Health more effective and easier in as far as fighting malaria, and of course ensuring that the rollout of vaccines is effective across the country. This particular broadcast has been brought to you by the Ministry of Health as part of ongoing efforts on routine immunization with focus on zero-dose children and the introduction of new vaccines into routine immunization. I'm Chris Higenyi. It's been a pleasure.